first thing you need to understand is that a narcissist's behavior isn't random. It's calculated. Every manipulation, every jab, every moment they twist the truth or play the victim, it's all part of a psychological script they've been rehearsing for years. When you don't know what you're dealing with, you personalize it. You think, what did I do wrong? Or maybe if I just explain myself better, they'll understand. But you could hand them your entire heart with a handwritten letter of logic and love, and they'd still find a way to make you the villain, because that's the game. And the first rule of surviving that game, know the player. Narcissists operate on a cycle: idealize, devalue, discard. In the beginning, you're everything. They mirror your dreams, your energy, your values, and then slowly, without you realizing, they start chipping away small insults disguised as jokes. Emotional withdrawal when you don't perform the way they want. Gaslighting when you call out their behavior. And the hardest part, they'll do it so subtly that you start doubting yourself instead of them. You stop trusting your own instincts. That's how they win. But once you understand their blueprint, something changes. You stop trying to fix it. You stop reacting. You stop explaining, because you realize it was never about clarity or connection. It was always about control. And the moment you stop playing their game, their power begins to shrink. You see, narcissists thrive on emotional responses. They feed off your confusion, your tears, your attempts to reason. So when you stop giving them that, when you become calm, silent, and grounded in truth, they lose control. You don't need to scream to be powerful. Sometimes the most powerful move is refusing to dance with their chaos. One of the biggest mistakes we make when dealing with narcissists is trying to prove our worth to them. We fall into this exhausting pattern of over-explaining, defending, justifying every emotion and action, hoping that if we just show them how kind we are, how loyal, how forgiving, they'll finally treat us right. But that moment never comes, because narcissists don't want understanding, they want dominance. And the more you try to prove your value, the more they dangle approval just out of reach, like a cruel game of emotional keep-away. You have to understand, narcissists aren't looking for connection, they're looking for supply, emotional energy, attention, control. So when you keep explaining yourself, when you keep trying to reason or seek fairness, you're not being heard. You're being studied. They're analyzing your vulnerabilities. They're taking notes on what triggers you, what makes you anxious, what you'll do to stay, and then they use it again and again. The most powerful shift happens when you stop trying to explain yourself. You stop needing their validation, because the moment you realize their approval is not a reflection of your worth, but a tool they use to manipulate you, everything changes. You start conserving your energy. You learn to speak in calm, clear boundaries instead of emotional monologues. You no longer need to be understood by someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. And here's the truth. Narcissists are most unsettled by your silence, your detachment, your refusal to play the emotional tug-of-war. That quiet confidence where you no longer chase, you no longer react, you no longer try to win their love. You simply exist beyond their reach. And that's when you finally start winning, not the game they created, but your own peace. There's something deeply unsettling that happens when you start emotionally detaching from a narcissist. At first, they don't quite believe it. They assume you're just playing a new angle to get their attention, because in their mind, you always come back, you always engage, you always respond. That's the script they've come to expect and rely on. But when you begin to truly step back, to remove the emotional hooks they've planted inside you, something powerful begins to shift. And it's not just in them, it's in you. Because what many people don't realize is that emotional detachment isn't about becoming cold or bitter. It's not about suppressing your feelings or pretending you don't care. It's about reclaiming your inner space. It's about no longer handing over your peace to someone who's never been capable of protecting it. It's realizing that your emotional energy is sacred and it doesn't belong in the hands of someone who uses it to control you. That's what narcissists do. They thrive on your emotional highs and lows. They study your triggers and exploit your empathy. They know just when to disappear, when to guilt trip, when to love bomb you into confusion. And every time you react, whether it's with anger, tears, pleading, or even silence laced with pain, you're still giving them what they want. attention, control, power. But when you detach emotionally, not just in words, but in truth, you're removing their favorite toy. And that drives them wild because suddenly they are not in control anymore. You start to see their tactics for what they are. You stop romanticizing the apology texts, the breadcrumb attention, the sudden bursts of kindness that always seem to follow your breaking point. You realize those moments were never genuine. They were strategies designed to keep you emotionally invested, confused, and always hoping that this time, maybe they've changed. But the turning point is when your nervous system no longer responds the same way. You read their messages and don't feel that same jolt of hope or anxiety. You hear their voice and it doesn't ignite chaos in your chest. You start observing instead of reacting. You start responding with calm detachment rather than emotional urgency. And that terrifies a narcissist because they can't hook into what they can't disturb. They'll try to provoke you. They'll push harder. They'll test your boundaries just to see if you'll flinch. They'll remind you of the good times, twist your memories, accuse you of being cold, unloving, selfish, not because any of it is true, but because they need you emotionally entangled again. That's the only way they know how to stay relevant in your life. And this is where the real strength is required. Because emotional detachment doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels lonely. It feels unnatural. It feels like silence when you're used to noise. But over time, it begins to feel like peace, like clarity, like standing in your own body for the first time in years without constantly looking over your shoulder for emotional chaos. You begin to realize that love should never feel like survival, that connection should never come at the cost of your self-worth, and that walking away emotionally, mentally, spiritually isn't weakness, it's power. Real, grounded, life-changing power. And here's the most beautiful part of detachment. You stop needing revenge. You stop needing them to understand what they did. You stop needing closure or apologies because you've given yourself something far more valuable than validation. You've given yourself freedom. Freedom from the cycles, from the gaslighting, from the emotional exhaustion of constantly trying to decipher someone who never had the capacity to love you in the first place. You start filling the space they used to dominate with things that nourish you, with people who reflect your value instead of question it, with moments that feel calm, stable, and honest. You start becoming someone new, not a version of yourself shaped by pain, but one shaped by healing. And the more distance you create, the clearer everything becomes. The lies, the manipulation, the subtle erasure of your voice, it all comes into focus. And you begin to thank yourself for walking away, even when it hurt. Detaching emotionally from a narcissist doesn't mean you never cared. It means you finally care about yourself enough to stop bleeding for someone who never intended to stop the wound. You finally understand that silence is not a sign of weakness. It's a statement of strength. It says, I am no longer available to be controlled, to be drained, to be diminished. I am not here to fix what you broke in yourself. I am here to protect what's left of me. And in that quiet, sacred space of detachment, you start to heal. Not all at once, not in some perfect, dramatic transformation, but piece by piece, day by day, you start to return to yourself. And that right there is the ultimate power move, eventually the most powerful thing you can do with a narcissist is nothing at all. No reaction, no explanation, no dramatic exits or emotional monologues, just silence. Stillness, and not the kind that's meant to manipulate or get a reaction, but the kind that comes from finally being done. When you've reclaimed your energy, when you've seen the pattern enough times to predict the ending before it begins, something inside you just stops needing to respond. Because the truth is, narcissists aren't afraid of your anger. They're not threatened by your arguments or your tears. In fact, they feed off them. They want you to stay entangled. They want your energy, good, bad, or chaotic, as long as it keeps them relevant in your world. So when you stop playing the game entirely, when your nervous system no longer flinches at their chaos, that's when they feel the shift. That's when they start to panic, not because they care, but because they're losing access to the supply they've always depended on. And here's what they hate the most: when you don't even announce that you're leaving. When you don't need to prove anything, don't seek validation, don't make a grand show of your strength. You just go quiet, you rise, you become unreachable, not in a petty way, but in a healed one, because you've learned that the loudest power doesn't need volume. It shows up in the calm, in the clarity, in the refusal to be disturbed by people who no longer deserve a seat at your table. You start letting your absence speak. Your peace speaks. Your refusal to explain, to justify, to shrink, just to be understood, that speaks louder than any argument you could ever have. Narcissists can't stand when they no longer have control over your emotions. When they realize you don't care what they think anymore. That's when their power dissolves. Not with shouting, not with revenge, but with your silence and your distance. Because in the end, walking away isn't just physical, it's spiritual, it's emotional, it's energetic. It's the act of deciding that your soul is no longer available for rent. And when you reach that point, when you finally stop fighting to be seen by someone who only saw you as a mirror for themselves, that's when you win. Quietly, fully,